Hi everyone, welcome to the Scientists in the Classroom webinar for teachers. Thank you for those who could join us in person, and this will also be posted on YouTube. For those who missed it, they can check in later and watch it. I'm Minda Berbecco. I'm Programs and Policy Group Director at the National Center for Science Education. I'm being joined here by Kate Heffernan, who is our intern working on the program, and many of you have already interacted with Kate, and some of you with myself. So we're really looking forward to working with you this semester. Thanks again for signing up for our pilot. So what we're going to talk about today, we'll keep this really brief, but leave a lot of time open to answer people's questions if you have any. I'll tell you a little bit about NCSE and our history for those who aren't already familiar. And then Kate's going to talk more about the program outline and some tips that we have for success in working with the program, what we think will help a lot to make it work. And then there'll be plenty of time along the way for questions. We'll take a little break in the middle and at the end for questions and answers too, for those who have them. So we work at the National Center for Science Education. Our primary goal is to support educators teaching the science around socially and politically contentious but scientifically sound topics. So many of you are probably already familiar with our former executive director, Eugenie Scott, whose primary focus in her time at NCSE was on evolution and supporting educators to teach evolution well. We started about a little over 30 years ago in the 1980s with Jeannie working to defend the teaching of evolution in public schools, and since that time you may have noticed we've expanded to include climate change education as well. These are the two areas that in our talking with educators, those are the areas where the biggest pushback is coming from, and so that's where we tend to focus most of our energy. So who are we now? Well, we've certainly grown since then. You can see our new executive director, Anne Reed, on the far left, and the rest of us in the crew, a bunch of scientists and educators who really want to make sure that teachers have the support they need to teach the good stuff. Myself, speaking right now, I'm on the left. That's me, Minda Berbecco, and Kate is on the right, and she's going to be working with me on the program. So the two of us, you'll be hearing from us plenty through the semester. So why are we doing the Scientists in the Classroom program? So at the beginning of this year, we sent a survey out. Some of you actually might have been part of the participants, and we said, what do you want? What do you need from NCSE? And to our surprise, one of the things that people mentioned was, we want scientists in the classroom. So we listened and we complied. And so this summer we've been working really hard on trying to make that a reality. So we asked, what do you want these scientists to do? And hopefully you'll feel similarly. I saw a lot of this represented in the applications that you filled out. Most of it was really explaining the real-life applications of how their science relates to the world outside, and as well as doing an activity with students. Something that people also mentioned was wanting scientists to come in and give a presentation on their research. Certainly, if that's really what you want 100%, then definitely talk to your scientists that you're working with about that. We're trying to push a little bit away from that because sometimes that one-way interaction isn't necessarily going to be the best for the students to really get to engage. And so if that's what you really want, try to figure out a way to make sure that there's an engagement piece associated with that. But we definitely encourage trying to do activities and really work with the scientists to figure out what the applied part of their science is to your students. And so Kate's going to talk a little bit about how the program is laid out, but I just wanted to give you some background as to why we decided to do it the way that we did. So it's set up with a one-time interaction with the students later in the semester, but then social media interaction throughout the semester between the teacher, the students, and the scientists. And the reason why we set this up is, again, the educators that we polled about the program said, yes, we want the scientists to come in, but we don't have a lot of time. So somehow trying to increase that interaction time without necessarily having them physically there, but also the importance of having at least one physical event where the scientist is there. And so this is our way of sort of trying to find a middle ground between those things. And so, like I said, in order to develop the pilot, what we did is we have this great teacher advisory board. Some of you are probably on it. And if you're interested in joining it, I can give you information about that later on, where we asked questions since January of this year, have been bugging them constantly about this program, what they would want and what they need. We also have a much larger teacher network that we've been bugging periodically as well and asking a lot of questions of. Right now we have grown it from 400 teachers to 3,200, so it's really grown exponentially, and we're looking forward to getting even more. But then we realized that we didn't want to be reinventing the wheel. There are other organizations that do similar kinds of programs. So we met with each of these different organizations and asked them, you know, what worked well for them and what didn't work and what do they recommend. And so we sort of melded all of those suggestions together to come up with our pilot idea. So I'm going to break really quickly for questions, and then I'm going to pass this on to Kate. Does anyone have any questions? You can obviously unmute yourself if you do, or you can just type it on the right-hand side in the group chat area. So Kate, one question that people might have is, why did we choose the focus of climate change and evolution? Would you mind speaking to that really quickly?
Yeah, so those are the two main topics that NCSC as an organization focuses on. So we wanted to do a NCSC-specific scientist and teacher outreach program. So we wanted to focus on climate change and evolution.
And if the teacher wants a scientist to come in and talk about another topic, such as neurobiology, or I'm trying to think of some other topics that might be unrelated, would that be okay? Or
so for this program in particular, we want the scientists, you and the scientists, to be focusing on either evolution or climate change in some capacity, because the scientists that we have found and vetted for you, their specialty is in either something related to climate change or something related to evolution. So we want to make sure they're speaking to what they're researching and know best.
Yeah, that's a good point. Some of you also might be wondering, particularly around climate change as a topic, you might have ended up with a biologist who's going to be speaking about climate change. And sometimes that's sort of unexpected, because when we think of climate change, oftentimes we think of Earth studies, for example, or Earth systems. But so I actually have a PhD in biology, but I studied climate change, and it's really, really very common to find biologists who study climate change, not just due to the impacts of climate change on biological systems, but also things that you're probably teaching, like nutrient cycling, the carbon cycle, those kinds of things. They actually tend to be typically found in biology departments. With evolution, you're most likely to find a biologist who's coming in, but with climate change, you could end up with a biologist, you could end up with an engineer, you could end up with an earth scientist. So there's a whole variety of different scientists that really engage with this topic. And it's a really useful and important lesson for your students too, knowing that, hey, I could study biology, but I could still study climate change, or I could study engineering, and I could still study climate change. So there's a really nice interaction between the different fields through climate change. So I'm going to pass this off now to Kate, who's going to talk a little bit more about the program outline.
All right, so your first step of the program, if you haven't already, is going to be to have a either phone call or face-to-face interaction with the scientist that you're matched with. And really, with this, a 20 to 30-minute conversation can get you really far. And then while you're on that call or meeting with your scientist, you're going to want to talk about yourself. How did you become a teacher? What are your students like? What are your students interested in? And what information will they already know when the scientist comes into the classroom, just so that when the scientist does come into the classroom, they aren't speaking on something that the students don't know about already and overwhelming the students. And then find out about your scientists too. How did they end up becoming a scientist? What do they study? Why do they study it? How is it related to evolution or climate change? Just so you'll know a little bit of background about the scientist that you can share with your students, and the scientists will also be sharing their background with the students. And then also, this is very important, a more technical thing. Make sure you're talking about the timing with your scientist when you're on this call or meeting at a coffee shop or whatever, to find out what date works best for the both of you for the one in-class visit by the scientist, and how many classes you'll want the scientist to be working with. And that means if you have an honors biology course or something, and you want your scientist to be in all 4 periods of the honors biology course, then make sure you explain that to your scientist. And also when your classes meet, just the timing during the day. And then also talk about social media. So throughout the semester, before the in-person visit, on a monthly basis, your class will be interacting with the scientist with this program through social media. So talk with the scientist about what form of social media will work best for your class, and think about what's available at your school, what's available to your students, what's appropriate, and then after that, exchange social media information. And then, yep, here's more about the monthly social media interactions. Make sure you talk about what form this will take with your scientist when you're on the phone with them. And some examples of social media that you could use. The scientist, you could create a Twitter handle for your class, and the scientist could create a Twitter handle. You can interact through that and tweet back and forth. You could do 10-minute monthly Google Hangouts, something similar to what we're doing now, where the scientist can be projected on the projector in your class or something to that degree. And then if Facebook posts, if your students can ask the scientist questions on Facebook, and then they can respond, the scientist can respond in the comments. So that'll vary based on, again, what's available at your school and what you and your students want to do. And then make sure you devote the time in your class to talk to the scientist monthly through the social media. So make sure it's a point that if you're interacting through Google Hangouts, okay, you understand that during 10 minutes of class once a month, you'll be doing a Google Hangout with your scientist if that's what you both choose to do. And then you can build this into your syllabus and assignments, and really integrate the scientist into your class. Okay, and then this is the analogy that we're using for this program, the dinner party analogy. So if you're having a dinner party and you're having guests over, of course you wouldn't leave the table and leave them on their own, and the same goes for the scientists. The scientists are coming in as guests. They're not necessarily the most comfortable with teaching and with students. But the great thing is that you're there and you're an expert on your class and how to deal with your students. So you're going to be there to support them and help them. And we're looking for this program to be a partnership between the scientist and the teacher, not just, oh, the scientist comes into class and you just let them do their own thing. They need your help and they want your help, and we've talked to them about this. So yeah, so just don't leave them hanging, and I'm sure no one will. Yep, and then continue to devote the time, or consistently devote the time to speak with your scientist through social media, and then make sure that you're devoting the time for the one in-class visit as well. And then when you're talking to your scientist too, it'd be good to ask them about their experiences with working with students in the past, so you know what sort of expertise they're coming in with when it comes to working with students. And again, their interests, what they study, and then also talk to them about what your expectations are for them from the class. Do you want them to emphasize their research and how they became a scientist, or do you want them to emphasize this one particular point on climate change or evolution? And then let them know the limitations and the parameters of your classroom. That just has to do with what's allowed in your class, what's allowed in your school, and that sort of thing. And then when the scientist comes to visit your class, again, you're going to be communicating with your scientist pretty frequently. So you'll have a plan already in place for when the scientist will be in class. Make sure that you're staying present and you're helping the scientist work with your students. Again, they're experts in the field, but maybe not experts with your kids, and you guys are the experts with your students. So I trust you more than the scientists. your scientist is going to have a lot of great experience and information and enthusiasm, but they just don't necessarily have the education background that you all do, so make sure you're continually supporting them. And then for the in-class visit, we encourage you to plan an activity to do with the students, and not just have it be a lecture-based visit, so that the scientists can really interact and get to know the students and show the students what it means to be a scientist. And if you're looking for possible activities to use, there's the resources tab under the scientists in the classroom link at ncseteach.com will have some great vetted materials for all different grade levels in both climate change and evolution that you can do with your scientists and your students. And remember, this is a pilot, so it's a learning experience for all of us. But we have a really great, solid structure for the program, and we want to hear from you if you're enjoying it, if you find some flaws with the program, we'd love to hear it. And we'll be sending out short surveys periodically, so just know that we'll be on you for that. But it won't be too time consuming at all. And then always feel free to check in and let us know how the program's going. And if you have any questions, need extra support, or having trouble communicating with your scientists, we're here to help. And any questions you may have, again, ask us at any time. And speaking of questions, does anyone have some questions for us now?
So, Kate, one question that came up when we were talking to the scientists earlier today in their webinar was they wanted to know about what they should be talking about with the students throughout the semester using the social media component. And one question that they had was, are we supposed to be doing an activity? How should we be taking advantage of the social media? And we talked to them a little bit about it, but maybe you could talk a little bit with the teachers about it too, so it's a little more clear what that piece is supposed to look like.
Yeah, so for the social media piece of the program, it's not going to be as formal as the in-class visit. We don't expect the scientists to facilitate an activity with your students through social media, but we will be sending out prompts. For example, in September, we're going to be sending out prompts to the scientists with what they should be talking to your classes about. So we're asking them to talk about their background, what they study, how they became a scientist, what their day-to-day life looks like as a scientist. So we'll be sending out the general topic guidelines for the scientists to be talking about with the social media communications.
Great. Are there any other questions? Okay. Oh,
I do have one.
You just muted. How do I do it? Hold on. We're
Can you hear me?
having some technical difficulties. Uh-oh. It's still muted. Stephen, if you want to ask a question, if you could type it in the right-hand side. We seem to have turned off our audio and can't turn it back on.
Okay. I don't have a place to type it.
It's weird.
There's not a window to type.
We definitely can't hear it still.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Definitely type it.
Please type it. Yeah. Thank you.
There's no place to type.
Okay. Hold on a second. I can go. I don't know why our audio isn't working. That's very strange, but I'll just step out for a second and listen on the other computer.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'll give you the prompt when Minda's at her at the other computer. All right, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry there's not a window to type in. So, but my question is, how are the scientists vetted? Because they'll have access to the building, and so I'd like to be able to answer that question for our administration.
I was able to hear the question.
All right, we heard the question. So.
Technology is great when it works, of
Yeah.
course. But thanks for being patient with us. So the question was, how are they vetted? And it sounded like there were two concerns. First of all, what's their scientific chops? But then also, they're going to have access to the school, and what's the vetting process associated with that? So I'm happy to speak to that. If you want me to, that's fine. So this is Minda speaking. So they go through an application process, so we can, which we shared with you, which we vetted their scientific chops based on that. So what's their area? What do they study? Checked up on them, made sure that they were legit. So that was that purpose. We're not doing any kind of like fingerprint testing or anything like that. So I know schools differ in what your requirements are in terms of bringing people into the school. If you have questions for us or if you have certain requirements for your school, we're happy to work with you on whatever is needed to get those scientists in there. So if you need them to jump through a couple hoops, if you need them to get a TB test, whatever it is, depending on the program, on the school, we understand that it can differ a bit. We're happy to help you guys get what you need in order to bring them in. So that's not a problem. Are there any other questions? Okay, sounds like we're good. That's a great question. And again, that's going to be part of the pilot as well, is we'll follow up with that to make sure that that worked out okay and it wasn't an issue for you guys bringing people into the school, because we understand that some schools can be very tricky. So we appreciate your patience with that. So thank you guys all for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
And for those who are on YouTube listening, thanks for watching. And we can't wait to start the program with you. Have a great day.
Bye.